Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate your comments, Mr. Secretary, Ranking Member Blumenthal, on the whole idea of getting together soon and really hashing out some of the issues that relate to appeals. I think there's widespread agreement that this is a big issue, an important issue. We don't want it to be the next problematic issue. We want to be able to preempt it. So, Mr. Secretary, I'll take you up on that offer. Senator Blumenthal certainly taking up on that offer. I look forward to working with all of you. But let me, in terms of just kind of trying to look at the parameters of what we're talking about, you know, you mentioned that the bill that myself and a number of members on the committee have introduced, it's a good start. It doesn't go far enough. And I'm fine with that, especially if you guys want to be more ambitious and more creative and effective in terms of the problem we're trying to get at. Let me ask a basic kind of threshold question. Is your concern that because it's a pilot program, therefore it's going to only impact a certain number of veterans, and so it's not really covering the broader kind of category of all veterans? Or is it the substance itself that it's not creating enough efficiencies, enough reforms in the process? So those are kind of two different things, right? It's either it's not covering enough because it is a pilot program by definition. It's not covering. Sometimes we do that here, though, because we want to see if something works. Or if it's the reforms aren't ambitious enough, or a combination of both.
Again, I don't want to disparage the bill or the work that you've done with the disabled American veterans and others, because I do think it's outstanding work, and it's led to this new approach, which may be considered more aggressive. I would add one more thing to it. It's voluntary.
Right.
Which, you know, the two things you mentioned add to it. It's voluntary. It'll take some time to do. So I think there's an opportunity to do even more faster, but I think that program is the basis of what we've done. Laura, do you want to make any more specific comments?
Certainly, thank you. I mean, we started working with the VSOs on this concept 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And certainly, one of the limitations is that it's voluntary. And we always knew that. We always knew that wasn't going to be the silver bullet, but it would sort of show, it would sort of model out perhaps other changes that could be taken. One of the things that's happened in the past year, working under Secretary and our Deputy Secretary, is we were charged this year when we were putting together our budget request to kind of come up with a requirement for appeals. One of the things that appeals has never had is any sort of time frame. Not that it's all about time. Fairness is certainly paramount. But in doing so, that's when we saw the stark picture that secretaries presented in other hearings, that if we continue on this path, we're not going to be sitting on 450,000 appeals.
Right.
We'll be sitting on over 2 million.
Oh, it's the next bold,
So
right? I mean, it's
that was sort of the shock factor, which caused us to take a different look, not just at amending what we currently have, but sort of putting it aside, focusing on the attributes that veterans are looking for: timeliness, fairness, transparency, and looking to design a new type of an appeals process.
Well, look, again, we look forward to working with you and the service organizations, because I know they've been very, very involved in this as well. You know, Mr. Chairman, we're talking about accountability, and Mr. Secretary, I want to go back to a topic that I know you're very focused on, we've all been very focused on, and you see it manifests itself in different ways, and it's the issue I've raised a number of times with the payment to the providers. And that's a problem. That's been a problem, as we've talked about, where the veteran himself or herself gets stuck with the bill because the VA goes after them, or the provider goes after them because they're not getting paid. But it also is a huge issue just for the providers. I was just informed of a Alaska group, outstanding healthcare group. Actually, it's a consortium with some of the groups you were just talking about, South Central and others, where they are now experiencing up to 180 days of non-payment, up to I was just informed this a couple days ago, $500,000 of non-payment. So, and I'd like to actually provide you and others specifically with their case so you can address that. But more broadly, You're saying the 30 days, look, I think that's music to everybody's ears, making sure that the veteran doesn't get caught in the middle, as we've talked about, and get, his credit ruined and things like that. But how do we get there when I already have constituents just informing me that it sounds like it's getting worse on provider payment, not better? And if this is going to be an accountability bill, do we need to take legislative action in conjunction with you so you can make that commitment about 30-day payments to our providers? I think we start addressing a lot of the problems out there if we can really strongly not only commit to that, but make it happen. So how do we do that?
There are a number of things that we've done in the short term. Number one, we no longer require the paperwork before we make the payment. We've gone to the best practice of the private sector, where we now will pay when the service is done, at least a good portion of it. We did that about a week ago. I think it was about a week ago we made that change. So already you're going to start seeing the backlog of bills dropping as the payments are made. Secondly, we instituted a crisis credit hotline for veterans, so that no veterans' credit could be affected by this. Again, these steps are steps we can take. We're taking them quickly to try to get this alleviated. The important thing is we built this bill so that we eliminate this issue altogether. We become the primary provider, the primary payer. And why don't you go ahead and describe the details?
Sure. Thank you, Senator. And we'd love to get those names. We actually have a team that goes out and works with those. And when we sit down with providers, we, first of all of them want to serve veterans. That's without question. And we always hear that. One of the things that we learn is that they have a lot of things on their books that we will never pay because we're not allowed to pay by law. And that's the whole idea of getting to one way of paying care. For example, in emergency room care, in some circumstances, we're the primary payer. In other circumstances, we're the payer of last resort, and we only pay a certain portion. But they think we're going to pay 100% of the bill. So getting to one system that makes sense will make sure that folks know exactly what they get to pay. Then the next piece is how do we pay timely and accurately? And there is in both versions of the choice consolidation bill, good things in there that I think they'll help us get to a system where we can pay timely and accurately. So I would divide it into two things. One is we got to make the system less complex, become the primary payer, and the other one is to get the technology and the system in place so we can pay timely and accurately.
Okay, thank you, Mr.